Inventors. I am beyond excited to have Stephanie Patek with me today. Stephanie is a rock star attorney and an expert at licensing. She does a lot of licensing deals, helps her clients with licensing, and I wanted to bring her on today to tell us a little bit more about how to monetize your intellectual property and various ways of generating that extra stream of income from your IP assets. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello, how are you, Karima?
Good. So, first question. I was curious whether you can actually license your intellectual property if you don't have protection or assets in place. So, if you don't have a patent, if you don't have a trademark, if you don't have a copyright registration, can you still license your work?
Yeah, good question. So theoretically, yes, of course you can. You can license anything without having IP protection, but most companies will want something, protected. Otherwise, why would they be spending the money to license your product or idea? Another thing, it's again important. Then, if you have some protection, then you'll be able to feel a little more comfortable that someone won't come and steal it. So you can, but it's probably not advisable.
Yeah, so I love that. And like you said, it's probably a contract, so you can agree on whatever you want with the other company. But yeah, my main concern would be what is stopping them at that point from just running away with it and going and registering the work on their own and stopping you. Not that that's the way most businesses conduct business, but just
Thank
something to
goodness.
be aware of. Yeah.
But yeah, but it can happen. Again, if it's something simple as trying to get whatever protection you can up front, then it's worth looking into for that reason alone.
All right. So, say, for example, a business owner, an inventor, or someone who created some great intellectual property, whether it be an invention and they protected it through a patent, or whether it be a brand and they protected that with a trademark, or whether it be work that they copyrighted and have a copyright registration. Say they have that registration, they spend the money to and invested in protecting their work. Now they're looking for ways to generate income from that intellectual property, from those assets. How can they go about finding potential licensees or someone who would be willing to give them money for their IP assets?
That's another very good question. So, once you have something, then you're like, okay, what do I do with it now? There are various things that an inventor or an IP owner can do. There are licensing agents that you can connect with. I would say reach out to people in the industry in which your invention is, your IP is. Um, Go to your contacts. You never know who people know. It's really important, I think, to kind of, have that discussion. Hey, don't be specific, hey, I'm working on something in the toy industry. Hey, do you know any licensing agents in the toy industry? Something like that. You want to get like appropriate contacts. And then, of course, you can do your research and then figure out, hey, what company would I want to work with on this? Who would be, some good potential licensees? And then you can reach out to them directly.
Okay, I didn't even know that licensing agents that was a thing. So thank you
Oh
for.
yeah,
Okay.
that's a big thing. It's a whole industry right there. I work with tons of licensing agents, and they do a great job. If someone's come up with just a character, and you think, oh, my character would be a great plush toy, and then the licensing agent will look at it and say, oh no, I see this on bedding. I see this as a lifestyle brand. We can do stationery. There are so many different things. So when you find a good licensing agent, they can absolutely open lots of doors.
How do they typically get paid? Do they take a percentage of your work, or do they have typically flat fees?
Good question. So you know what? There's a whole range of how they work. It depends on the agent or the agency, but typically, depending on what they're doing, they may take a monthly fee, and then they would get some sort of commission on any agreements that they help facilitate and enter into.
Well, yeah, we'll be sure to link to some of that information in the show notes as well. Okay, so licensing is like renting your intellectual property. So basically, it's like making money in your sleep while freeing up your time to go do whatever you really want to do. Can you share some success stories with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think you bring a good point, just getting back to even, thinking about licensing itself. Licensing is really creating something and then figuring out ways to monetize it without really having to do a lot of the work yourself, right? So once you have something protected and you license it to a third party, you, as you said, you rent your IP to a third party, there are things that you'll have to do and that you want to do to make sure that you remain the valid IP owner. But it is true. The licensee will be doing most of the work, and then you can just sit back and collect the royalties. A great example of this is Star Wars. Now, I'm using a big example, but of course, if you know, it's more important to if you're a smaller inventor or entrepreneur, it's important to make sure that you have everything in place because Star Wars is huge. You can start small. You want to make sure that you have the foundation. So think of Star Wars, right? They have figurines, toys, bedding, pens, clothing, jewelry, watches, bags, and wait. I found this the other day at my local Target and I couldn't resist.
Oh, wow.
Okay. A Darth Vader heart tin filled with chocolates. Very nice. It's got but there you go. So seriously, if you come up with something great, I think the possibilities are endless. Um, of course, there are many other examples like that. Think of Pokemon, Mickey Mouse, Frozen, Super Soaker was a patented invention, and then he licensed it out to whichever toy company he. I should know this, but whichever toy company he did license to. Here's something else too. If you want to think of success stories, I've seen recently, especially, some really unusual pairings like Kentucky Fried Chicken shoes and clothing
Oh,
and a
wow.
Taco Bell hotel. I don't know if you've seen them. Maybe you
Very
watched
nice.
them. It's kind of, just your imagination can run wild.
I love some of these examples, but you're right. Like the possibilities are truly endless. All the things that you can do, the power of a brand or the power of the artistic value in some work, and all the different platforms and media um, that you can sell them through or even license them through.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just finding that right partner, that right licensee, that right agent, someone to put it together.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of people are confused. They don't really know the difference between licensing and assignments. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between the two?
Yeah, and it's really important to know the difference between the two. So, licensing, if you're the intellectual property owner, you're basically giving limited rights of use to a third party for goods and services, but you remain, as the original IP owner, you remain the owner. When you assign those rights, you're basically giving them away to a third party. So it kind of brings up a good point about contracts. It's really important to understand what's in your contract before you sign it, because really sometimes one word can make the difference between keeping and losing IP ownership. And an unfortunate story here is someone had come to me a few years ago and she had, she already signed a licensing agreement and she had a question about an audit provision to make sure she was getting proper payment. So I had reviewed the contract, again, already signed, and I explained and I answered her question. But then I asked her, you do realize that you signed away your intellectual property rights, don't you? And she says, no, I didn't. And she says, I signed a licensing agreement. It's called a licensing agreement. And I had to unfortunately explain to her it doesn't matter what it's called, it matters what's inside. And inside, there was an option provision that if they gave her X amount of money by a certain date, that they would be the new intellectual property owners. And unfortunately, that's what happened. She was just dumbfounded. So, again, it just had she read it and understood it before she signed it, she wouldn't have been surprised.
It's a really good lesson, especially for new business owners or people just starting out in business. I mean, never sign anything without reading it. If you read it and don't understand it, make sure to have an attorney on your team who understands what you
Yep.
are and aren't giving away. And then one example, Stephanie, I know we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, is Dave Chappelle and the Chappelle Show. how as a young artist and a young comedian, he was so eager to just get started on work and on working, that he basically gave away the rights to his material. So years and a couple of decades later, another company is selling his show to Netflix. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and just some of the pitfalls, and what to avoid when you're starting out?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's one of those things where when you're starting out, probably a lot of people are just happy to get a contract and they think, oh wow, I'm so excited, I'm just going to sign it. But you can sign away your rights. So in that instance, and you might know a little bit more than I do there, but with that, if he signed away his material, then he has no rights to it. And then a third party can basically monetize it however they want without his permission. You think about, I think it was Donna Karen sold her name. She wasn't able to use her name. And I think Haley Page is a recent one as well, where she's claiming that the company that she licensed her name to now owns it. So it's unfortunate, but then again, even Taylor Swift, if you sign away your rights, you can't, it's very hard, very rare to get them back. And, in a case like that, even if they had known what was in the contract, they still might have signed it, to take their big chance. But in my opinion, it's just good to know what the options are, and then you can make the best decision for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And then things like, I mean, somebody using your name, it's your name, and you've built like so much goodwill and empowered that brand and built a big brand out of it. Make sure that you know what you're signing. And also, what I would add is everything is negotiable. It doesn't hurt to push back. And I know for studies show that women, for example, when looking for a job, or when they have a job opportunity, they never negotiate their salary. And it doesn't hurt to ask. The worst that can happen is you get a no and you're back in the same position as before. But every contract, just because it's written on a piece of paper, doesn't mean that it's set in stone. You can always change it, and work with your attorneys for that. But yeah, and the example of Dave Chappelle, it's one of the richest people, in one of the richest artists out there, can't undo even the best. And even all with all this money, you still can't go back and change things and change contract laws. Years he knew that he was still in the wrong, but used his branding power, and he used basically his connection and business, um, uh, relationship with Netflix to get the show pulled back from Netflix. But not everybody is Dave Chappelle, so make sure to contracts.
That's true. And Karima, you bring up a great point. It's really important to negotiate. I mean, you don't know until you ask. That's why it's like with contracts, it's not one size fits all. Everyone has slightly different concern. Everyone has something, in particular that they want either in or out, or so I think that's a great point. And if people take anything out of it, today, make sure you know what's in your contract, and then, yeah, be able to negotiate. Ask the question. You never know.
The next thing I wanted to ask you is the difference between exclusive and non-exclusive licenses. Can you tell us a little bit more about the difference between the two?
Sure. So when you have intellectual property and you're licensing out any given good or service, you have the choice between exclusive and non-exclusive. Exclusive, an exclusive license is basically to basically means that you're only giving one company, a third party, to create that good or service in the contracted territory. And in that case, you really want to make sure you're dealing with someone who can monetize your license successfully, because you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And the non-exclusive license means that, well, you're going to give that right of manufacture, of a good or use of a service, to lots of third parties, and they can do the same or similar items or services in that territory. So think of it this way. That can become a problem in the marketplace because multiple companies may be fighting for the same shelf space or customer. So, getting back to the Star Wars example, most of their licenses are non exclusive, but they will usually limit channels of distribution or the particular type of goods to be sold. So that would help minimize competition for the same items and customers.
That brings up another question that I have, and just something that occurred to me. And I know we spoke about one specific example, but say, for example, someone come up with a great product, and now they're going to be selling it at a big retailer, Target, Walmart, Sephora, or whomever. Do you need a license in that case, or do they? How does it typically work with big retailers?
So you're talking about licensing it directly to the retailer or to a third party who will sell into the retailer?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so no, and don't, yeah, no, don't feel badly at all. There are so many nuances when it comes to licensing. So just so you know, all the years that I worked in the toy industry, I worked on our licensing agreements as a non-attorney. So, I really had a big familiarity, a great familiarity with it. And then these last, I've been licensed since 2007. So I've been for about 13 years working from the legal side as well, and I'm always learning new things. So it's, there's a lot here. So if you have a great product, right, and you've gone to Karima, you've patented your product, you have this product, you're ready to go, you're excited, you find a licensing agent or you find someone to create it. You have a few options, right? You can either outside the licensing route, you can decide, hey, I know how to manufacture this. I'm going to take the risk, I'm going to take the expense, and I'm going to figure out how to make it myself. Then you can sell it directly into the store. But if you grant your rights for someone else to do it. So a manufacturer that sells into Target, or Target, they do a lot of private label. So sometimes you can go direct to Walmart or Target and they will find the manufacturer. It would be similar. You're still licensing your intellectual property rights, and that third party will be able to sell goods or provide services using your intellectual property. I think that the main thing here is to understand what the industry is, what the range, of royalties are, what you should expect, because each situation is going to be a little bit different. If you go straight to Target or Walmart, there will be additional provisions in there. There probably won't be if you just go straight to a manufacturer who will then sell into the big box retailers. I hope that makes sense. Did that
It does.
answer the question?
Yes, yes. And
Okay.
actually, that brings up another question that I get a lot from clients and potential clients. And based on your experience, I don't know if how difficult is it? So I'll have people asking me, they have a great idea, they have a little prototype, but they're not actually manufacturing and selling this. They want to license it. Is it easier to license a product after you've made it and sold it, or can you still find potential licensees with just the idea and a prototype?
Interesting. So that's a really good question. Again, it probably depends more on the industry. So think about it this way. If you have some sales under your belt, think of Shark Tank. That's a perfect example. If you have some sales and some numbers and you bring that to a manufacturer or a licensee, they'll think, "Oh, wow, okay, I have some proof of concept here. That's good." But, even without it, if you find someone that believes in you and believes in the product and thinks, wow, this is exactly what I've been looking for, you may not have to jump through all those hoops. So if you have some sort of prototype, I would venture to say that's a good thing, because it's hard sometimes for someone to use their imagination and figure out, oh, what exactly is this? If you have something and you can see it and touch it and feel it, then that should help.
Yeah, and I love Shark Tank because it really shows an actual real life example of what is done on the licensing front, and Mr. Wonderful is loves his licensing
License
structure.
licenses. It will exactly, and it's true too, because a lot of times, when the sharks invest, they're investing in the company, and the company is already doing something. The people come into the tank, they're already selling or creating. But a lot of times, yeah, like Mr. Wonderful, he'll say, "Hey, let's license this. This way you can sit back, exactly as you were saying, and rent out the intellectual property and make some money for doing less than you would if you were, running the company yourself."
Yeah, I honestly I love the idea of licensing. I love licensing because it's just, you do the work once and you can collect on it for the rest of your life, potentially with the right attorney and the right contracts in place.
It's true, true. I think, and licensing too, just getting back to the Kentucky Fried Chicken example, there are so many things. I think there's Crayola nail polish, and I mean, just think of the creative avenues that you can go down. It's just amazing. You can come up with so many different things. I love this industry. It's basically, finding something to create, finding a way to monetize what you've created. I just love it.
I absolutely love it too. I mean, just it makes me even more excited about protection, IP protection. It's because, not only are we helping you protect your work, but also helping you create these vehicles and these assets that can potentially help you earn forever.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So, Stephanie, one last question. How are licensing deals typically valued? So, I came up with this great idea, or for example, I have a business and it's a profitable business. I'm looking for licensees. I want to do a little bit less of the work. How do people usually come up with that number?
Yeah, and again, a very good question. It really depends on the industry, what you're licensing, who is licensing it, and, similar considerations. So if you're Marvel, you're probably going to get a huge advance and guarantee and a large royalty rate. But if you're just starting out, you probably get a modest advance, if anything, and a lower royalty rate. I think the moral here and the takeaway here is just to research the industry, research the product, research the background of what you're actually, what pond you're jumping around in, because that's really where you're going to be able to figure out the value. And another thing too is, even if you find those ranges, you have to find someone that believes in it and that's willing to pay for
Yeah. And one last question. I know I said last question last time, but
it.
I know most people, when they think licensing, they think royalties. Are there other way of structuring a deal instead of getting royalties? How can they get paid?
Oh, absolutely. Again, it depends. There are so many different possibilities. You think about it, it can happen. As you said earlier, a contract is really just a blank slate, and you get to put in all the things that you think about, and ways to work together. There can be flat fee, per piece, again, think back to Shark Tank, right? Instead of a royalty, sometimes they ask for $1 per piece sold. So that's also an option. I think the basic ones, though, are some sort of flat fee, fixed payment, or some sort of royalty that would be based on sales. The biggest thing is, congratulations to everyone who's created something. I think it's amazing what you do. Um, IP protection is super important, especially if you're looking to license. And I think, again, the two biggest takeaways, that, when before you even enter into a licensing agreement, understand what the contract says, find an attorney who understands licensing, and don't be afraid to ask and negotiate. That one's from you, Kareem. I like that one. It's absolutely, you don't know until you ask.
It just doesn't hurt. Yeah. Honestly, having worked with you and having seen how you work on your agreements, I can't believe that some people just ask for templates or go and use templates. Stephanie will never, ever, ever do that. Every single deal is different and she really looks at them differently. What you want, what your business goals are different from X and Y and Z's business goals. So taking the time to talk with your attorneys to make sure that your attorneys understand your goals, is a very important step.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's huge. No, and I agree. And so many times people say, "Oh, I'd like a template," or yeah, exactly, or they'll just sign a non-disclosure or use someone else's contract. I mean, the best is web terms, and
Google.
Google. Okay, there you go. You're like, "Oh, this looks good. I'm just going to copy it," and you read through it and you go, "Oh my God, that has nothing to do with what you're doing." But
Yeah.
anyway, you don't know what you don't know, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it's a small price to pay to get things done up front rather than losing your rights forever, like Dave Chappelle or others.
True,
So yeah.
true, true. And and don't give up. Really, just keep talking to people, connecting with people, especially nowadays that we're all virtual. You know, the social media has been helpful. And here's a benefit of protecting your intellectual property. You can feel more comfortable about putting it out there and trying to, find and solicit third parties. Of course, non-disclosures, sometimes you want that non-disclosure. That's another topic for another day, but generally once you have something protected, you can feel a lot more comfortable kind of showing it to everybody.
Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank
If
you, Karima.
our audience members wanted to contact you and work with you, how can they find you or how can they
Oh,
reach?
oh, thank you. Well, just as per my background, my new background, go to podiclaw.com and just fill in the contact page. Comes right to me. I'm happy to talk to anyone. Let me know that you watched this interview through Karima, and yeah, this way I know, and I'm happy to speak to anybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me. You take care, Karima.
You too.